Welcome back to MVM. Today we're excited to bring you a Kickstarter preview. This one is called Tang Garden. It is a 1 to 4 player game from Thundergryph Games and absolutely looks amazing.
Oh yeah, the table presence is phenomenal for sure. And this is just a prototype.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a lot better than most games we see, but it's really gorgeous looking. This is mostly a tile placement game, but there's quite a bit more going on. It's going to remind you of a few different games. It's a really cool combination.
So the idea is it takes place during the Tang Dynasty, which was around 600 to 900 AD. And what's going on here is that the Emperor wants to build a garden. And to do so, he's hired all of us as engineers to be able to come into this garden board and lay garden tiles and landscape tiles around. So that by the end of the game, the character is going to be looking down these sight lines at all these different landscapes in a panoramic fashion around them. And you're going to be scoring victory points or coin, basically getting paid to be able to do these very particular things through the course of the game. The game is going to be played over an X number of rounds, and those rounds are denoted simply by or the game is going to end simply by when one of these tile stacks is gone or some of these landscape tiles are removed from the board. Right. So we have kind of a game in progress already, but we're going to talk to you guys about the components and then the setup and how to play.
And before we talk about how to play, let's talk about these components specifically. They're very beautiful, as we mentioned, but starting with the board itself, as you can see, we have a game in progress, but the board is very stark and white. And then you're going to put these landscape tokens around the board in a specific pattern. These are going to be the tokens that when they get covered with a normal tile, you're going to pick those up, and then you're going to choose one of these landscape tiles to place around the edge of the board, which will come into play in end-of-game scoring.
Yeah, there's two different types of landscape tiles. There's small and there's large. You're going to notice cuts on the edges of the board. These are going to create sight lines or landscapes that your character is going to be looking in cardinal directions, northeast, south, or west, by the end of the game and scoring points depending upon what they see on these very specific tiles. In the very center of the board, there's going to be a 2x2 tile that is double-sided. This is the starting location. It's going to have the three different types of tiles incorporated into it. You have rock tiles, you have water tiles, and you have greenery tiles, and then you also have special tiles. These are going to be shuffled and placed face down in the 4 different locations on the edges of the board, and then one at each of them is going to be placed face up at the very start of the game. And as you see, we already have a game in progress. You're also going to notice a lot of different decorations. This game is all about trying to lay tiles on the board and then decorate those tiles with different things that the characters want to see as they walk around within the garden. You have pavilions, you have trees, 5 different types of trees, which act as kind of a set collection within the game. You have fish and birds and different types of flowers.
Bridges.
And bridges, yeah, that you'll be covering these specific tiles. Now, each of these tiles can only hold very specific type of things. So as you build out the board, you have to have very specific locations that are built. So there's a timing aspect in here too. You can't build trees unless you have greenery. You can't put fish on the board unless there's water elements.
And that really does come into play while you're playing, that timing aspect, because you might try to decorate and then find out that there's no place to put that decoration.
And next are the characters. There are 12 unique characters. Each of the characters is represented by a very specific miniature. At the start of the game, there are 6 starting characters. You're going to randomly give these out to the 4 different players, or how many different players you have at the table. They're also going to denote how high up you're going to start on which of the 3 different tracks that are on your player board. There's 2 things that you need to notice on them. The top part is an active ability that you'll always have for the entire game unless that character's miniature has been removed from the card and placed within the garden. The bottom part is the part you want to have at the end of the game. That is their sightline and what they're trying to see at the end of the game. So they're only going to score the bottom part at the end of the game if they're actually on the board. So there's this weird dichotomy of, I want to use the character as long as I can. The other neat thing is that these characters have to be placed on very specific portions within the garden. There's these round circles. There's places on bridges. They can be in pavilions, but these start to get filled up through the course of the game.
Right, plus one thing you got to know about the characters, it's not all about what they're going to be seeing in these landscapes. Some of them might score points, but then lose points if other specific characters are in their sight line. So there is some interactive aspect to those as well.
You also, I mentioned a player board. On the player board itself, you're going to see 3 different tracks. These represent the 3 different types of terrain elements. As you move up these tracks, it unlocks your ability to influence new characters on your side of the table. Also along the bottom, there are 4 tokens. These are special abilities that you can take through the course of the game. They're extremely powerful, but they can only be used once per game. Then you have the decoration cards. These cards you'll be purchasing. They give you the ability to gather these 3D elements to put them into play. They also give you some set collection through the course of the game. You're going to acquire these on your side of the board. And that's basically all the different things besides the coins. Coins are the victory points. So, to start the game, each player, as we said, is going to start with one of the characters. You're going to start with a blank, stark board with the landscape tiles around the outside and just the garden tile. Now, how do you play the game? It's very simple. There's one of two actions that you can take on your turn with two optional actions. You can take both of these optional actions, but you must take one of the two main actions. The first main action is to simply take a garden tile and place it on the board. You can take from any of the four outside stacks. They can be one that's face up, or they can be any one that's face down. You can look at the tile, and then you're going to try to place it into a location that is next to a pre-existing garden tile on the board. What you're trying to do here is match up sides. So if you played games like Carcassonne, you're trying to match up those specific types of terrain types.
Yeah, the basic gist of the tiles is going to get you a combination of money or raising yourself on any one of these three tracks throughout the game. Like Jeremy said, those unlock the ability to add more characters, but also if you get those tracks to the very end of the player board, it's going to be 6 points for each of them at the end of the game. Now, purchasing a decoration doesn't involve any exchange of money. You're simply going to be taking decoration cards and deciding which one you want to keep and place on the board. Now, here's some things you need to know. You're going to take 2 native decoration cards every time you do. And then you're going to take an additional decoration card for each one of these stacks that is face down. There are some characters that might allow you to take even more, but you're going to take these cards and then choose from any of these. And like we said earlier, there's set collection going on here. There's going to be things that you might want to place in front of certain characters on the board to score you points at the end of the game. You're simply going to choose one of those cards, lay it down in front of you, and discard the rest. There are a few things to keep in mind about these cards. Some of them, well, all of them are going to show you up in the upper left-hand corner or right-hand corner the type of terrain that it must be played on. And then underneath that, there may or may not be another icon that shows you one of the tracks that you could move up on. Some of these decorations even allow you to move up on any one of the tracks.
Right.
And then at the bottom, there it explains the set collection. There's very standard set collection here. Some of them, like the trees, you want to collect 1, 2, 3, 4, and it kind of grows exponentially. Others you want to pair together, things like that.
Yep. These elements, once they are played, they stay on your side of the board. That is, the card is going to stay there, so you recognize which things you have contributed to the garden. However, the 3D element that you contribute to that space stays there, which is going to provide line-of-sight bonuses for players' characters at the end of the game. So it's kind of unique. You want to get these decorations in front of you in order to score the points, but you want to place them in locations that do not benefit the other players at the table.
And like we said earlier, there's going to be times where you pull a couple decorations and you need a greenery space, and there are no open greenery spaces on the board. If at any time you take decoration cards and you can't play any of them, you discard them and then you're forced to take a tile action.
Right. Now, anytime you place one of those garden tiles, as David said at the very beginning, whenever you place it and you cover up one of these landscape tiles, it tells you which of the small or large landscape tiles you have to place at that time. It's not part of one of your main actions. It's just a necessary thing that has to happen. So in this case, I took a small tile, meaning I have the availability of taking one of these 2 small tiles and placing it somewhere on the board. Obviously, you want to place those in locations that are strategically important for your characters. So we've talked about the 2 main actions, talk about the 2 optional actions that you can also take on your turn. One of the optional actions is to use one of your lanterns. There are 4 lanterns that are at the bottom of your player board. All these provide you special abilities, such as taking 2 tiles on your turn or taking 2 of the decoration tiles and so forth, even moving characters you place on the board. The other optional thing that you can do is...
Yeah, to influence one of your characters. Now, you're going to have one character to begin with. When you get up on all 3 tracks to a certain point, you are allowed to influence a character. When you are able to do that, you're actually going to look at one of the other 2 face-up characters on the board, select one of those, and then you're able to place a character out on the board. It can be the one you had from the very beginning or the new character that you took. What's interesting about this is depending on the powers that you have after you take the other character, that may play a role into which character you want to place out there, because you might want to tap one character for its power for a much longer period of time.
And you're going to keep going around the table until one of the in-game conditions is met, and there's 2 of them. One is if any one of these stacks on the outside corners are depleted, that's going to end the game. We're going to finish up the round so everyone has an equal number of turns. or if there is only 3 landscape tiles left on the board. That again is going to trigger the end of the game. You're going to score up all the victory points. Victory points are done by all the coins that you've collected. You are an engineer who's trying to collect money for what you're contributing to the garden. You're also going to get victory points for any of your decorations. It's all set collection that you're going to acquire there. And then all of your characters, you're going to look at any of the characters that you've had on the board in the cardinal direction that they're looking, follow that line of sight, and see if they meet any of the requirements at the bottom of their card.
Yeah, it's definitely a game where you can score a lot of points at the end, and you can score quite a few points throughout just from tile placement alone.
This is not a review, but when we look at this game, this has one of the most cool spatial elements to it. It's a beautiful looking game, especially as the garden starts to grow and you start adding all these 3D elements. It's stunning to look at.
Yeah, it brings in a lot of elements of other games we've played in the last couple of years, like topiary. I mean, the trees are going to remind you of photosynthesis, but it's not really like that. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous game with some really interesting gameplay.
That is Tang Garden from Thundergryph Games, 1 to 4 player. Yes, it can be played solo. If you guys have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.